All right, guys, today I wanted to talk about some of the winners and losers of the NBA offseason. We'll just talk about a few teams today. I might talk about a few more teams here soon. Let me know in the comments if you think I was right, if you think I was wrong, if you think I should have talked about someone else, or maybe I'm missing somebody. Let me know in the comments. These are just a few teams I felt like did really well in the NBA offseason, and one team that I felt like kind of took a step back. So the first team I want to talk about, the biggest winner of the NBA offseason, is the Los Angeles Lakers. No questions asked. They got the best player in the world, LeBron James, and it worked out perfectly. The transition will be seamless because LeBron can play with anybody. He can play multiple positions. He can do everything on the floor. He has no flaws to his game. Obviously, some parts are exceptional and some parts are just incredible and some parts are just great. But either way, he has no weaknesses when he's on the floor. And the Lakers are immediately, with the acquisition of LeBron James, a playoff contender. I don't know 100% if the Lakers are making the playoffs this year because you still have four other guys on the floor. And as much as the Cleveland Cavaliers lineup was maligned for its lack of production, they were still decent. George Hill, good player. Kevin Love, all-star. And then a few other role players on that team, Kyle Korver and other players that actually filled roles and were shooters around LeBron James. It's going to be interesting because they picked up some players in the offseason, Lance Stevenson, Rajon Rondo, who are veterans and actually helped the teams they were on. So Lance Stevenson at times was really effective for the Pacers. And Rajon Rondo was really good for the New Orleans Pelicans last year. But you're putting him with LeBron and, we're going to find out. Do you have to have shooters around LeBron James, or can you have LeBron James play off the ball more? That's going to be fascinating to see with the Lakers, because if LeBron can do what he said, he kind of mentioned that he would like to play more of like a post-style offense. I honestly look at LeBron these next 4 years that he's with the Lakers. He might turn into Karl Malone for the Utah Jazz back in the day, where he's kind of a post player, great passer out of the post, just a dominant force inside, can get to the rim, but can also pass the ball. And that might be able to make it work with some of these non-shooters this year. We'll see. It might be a wait-and-see year for the Lakers, because I'm sure they were expecting to have Paul George come over, and he didn't. So, that was one of those things that, he wasn't in control of. But LeBron going to the Lakers is a big-time win for the Lakers. Second team that has to be considered a big winner in the offseason is the Toronto Raptors. And I know Raptors fans are pretty devastated with the loss of DeMar DeRozan to the Spurs. He's one of those guys that was loyal to Toronto, gave his heart and did everything he could for Toronto. So they're frustrated with that. But if Kawhi Leonard comes back and plays like he is, he's an MVP candidate, top 5 player in the league. He might be top 3 player in the league. I mean, he didn't really play last year at all. He came back for a short little stint while he was hurt. When Kawhi Leonard was right, he was literally, like, the Spurs were up on the Warriors, and they looked like they were in control. And Kawhi Leonard is a Defensive Player of the Year candidate at all times. He's on the floor. On top of that, he is like a 50% three-point shooter. He is ridiculous offensively and in just his efficiency. He is an absolute monster pickup for the Toronto Raptors. And what that does, if the Toronto Raptors were not big on DeMar DeRozan, which obviously, well, I guess you can't say that they weren't big into DeMar DeRozan. They gave him the contract, and DeMar DeRozan is no big loss. That's why we're not going to talk about the Spurs today. Yes, the Spurs lost Kawhi Leonard, but they got DeMar DeRozan, who's an all-star in the East. But Kawhi Leonard is a top 3 player in the NBA when healthy. He is absolutely dominant. He changes the game when he's on the floor. He's one of those players that alters a team's game plan, because you have to alter your game plan offensively to make sure he's covered. And then you also have to alter your offensive game plan to make up for the fact that he will guard your best offensive player and give them nightmares. He's the only player that just like affects LeBron more than anyone else in this league. In LeBron's career, I don't think there's anyone that has affected him like Kawhi Leonard has. He's Scottie Pippen. So big time pickup for the Toronto Raptors. They didn't have to give anything other than DeMar DeRozan and I can't remember the other piece. It was a small piece that went along with him, but they didn't have to give up any young pieces. They didn't have to give up Anunoby. And that's just big time for Toronto. So huge pickup for the Toronto Raptors. And you never know. Kawhi Leonard hasn't said anything. He's mentioned a few small things that probably came from his agent or his uncle, like he doesn't want to go to Toronto, but it sounds like he's probably going to play. And who knows? Maybe he likes it there. You hear mention of him not liking the cold and stuff, but you know what? Maybe he'll get over it. Maybe he'll have some poutine and be fine and enjoy Toronto, which I hear is a great city. So you never know. And Masai Ujiri is going to do everything he can to convert him to the Toronto Raptors. And the other winner on this list is Oklahoma City. We'll talk about them in just a sec. But you know what? Oklahoma City did the thing that Toronto's going to hope to do with Kawhi Leonard. And they got Paul George to stay. So OKC gets a big-time free agent in Paul George, who was a part of their team. They gambled and they got him. But on top of the Paul George thing, which is huge, and we've actually talked about in former videos, the fact that they were able to get rid of Carmelo Anthony's contract for very little, like a late first-round pick to get rid of just a monster contract that was just going to put you deep in the tax, they get rid of that. Big Sam Presti, as much as he's been maligned for the James Harden trade, and he deserves every bit of it for trading James Harden, that was a big move. Those are savvy moves. And getting Paul George for 4 years, keeping him with Russell Westbrook makes them incredibly relevant still. You know, they still have to get through the Utah Jazz, by the way. But they are going to be really good. They get Robertson back. They're going to be a really interesting team to watch. Still have Steven Adams. That's a good team that will play defense. When Robertson was on the floor, they were a great defensive team last year. If they can figure things out, get a little more chemistry going between Paul George and Russell Westbrook, that's a fun team to watch and really interesting. So another big winner is Oklahoma City. Okay, the only loser I wanted to talk about today, and they're not losers, I think they took a step back, is the Houston Rockets. First off, though, they get the signing that they were worried about. They get Chris Paul, but it's a 4-year deal. It's a big money deal. I don't know the exacts. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong, but it's around $160 million. If I'm wrong, let me know, but it's in that range, and I believe it's 4 years. If I'm not, let me know. But anyways, they got Chris Paul, which is good. You have to sign your superstars. And I'm not going to rag on the Rockets for getting Chris Paul because he's incredible. He's the reason they beat the Jazz. He absolutely, if they don't have Chris Paul in that series with the Utah, that's a different series, by the way. But Chris Paul took the reins, and he did the things we talked about. So I talked about Houston during the regular season that when they get to the playoffs, they need a secondary star to take some of the load off of James Harden. And Chris Paul did that in the playoffs. He absolutely, when Harden was off the floor or when the defense was zoning in on James Harden, you have Chris Paul who was able to weave his way into traffic. He's a mid-range killer because that little mid-range jump shot from him is a layup. And it murdered the Jazz. It absolutely, like, people want to talk about Clint Capella and dominating. He didn't dominate Rudy Gobert. The person who dominated the Utah Jazz was Chris Paul, and he does not get the credit he deserves for that series and just for his career in general. So that right there is the reason why the Houston Rockets are not a big loser, but they took a step back because they lost two pieces that I think they're going to miss more than we realize in Trevor Ariza and Luke Mbamute. You know, they still have PJ Tucker, who was a big part of that team. He can play center for them. He allows them to do their switching defense. That was a top 5 defense in the league. But a big reason they were a top 5 defense in the league also, Mbamute and Trevor Ariza. That's a tough loss because Ariza shot a high percentage from 3. He could switch on defense. He's possibly their best defender. Rockets fans, you always let me know in the comments, but he's one of their best defenders on that team. Mbamute as well, who's known as just a defensive monster. They're not on that team anymore, and a big reason, like, we know the offensive firepower of the Rockets, and we talk about the Rockets, and rightly so for their offensive firepower, but their defense was dominant last year. It's not going to be quite as good. So the Rockets are still going to make the playoffs, still probably a top 4 team in the West, but that variance is bigger now. 63 wins, I just don't see it because you have a defense that's probably going to drop back from top 5 to top 15. You know, maybe top 10 if they play really well. Maybe they can overcome those losses. But I think the Houston Rockets are now a 50-something win team, 55 to 58 wins next year. I think that defense was that good because the reason the Jazz struggled was that defense. The Jazz actually did really well against the Houston Rockets in the playoffs offensively. or defensively relatively well with Dante Exum on Harden, all those things, blah, blah, blah. This isn't to talk about the Jazz, but it was their defense that was so good against Utah. Capella matched up well against Gobert. But on top of that, Capella could switch spots. But it's not just Capella. It's Trevor Ariza and Luka Mbamute, PJ Tucker, their entire team able to switch. Can they keep up the switching without those players? I don't know. Because what happens is you have weaknesses now that other teams can take advantage of. And the Rockets become more and more that team that just outguns you. And that defense was really good against Golden State too, by the way. That, like, the Rockets should have won that Golden State series if Chris Paul doesn't get hurt. That's why if I'm a Rockets fan, that was just, shout out to Rockets fans. That had to just be heartbreaking to see him hurt. It hurt my heart to see Chris Paul get hurt because you knew how good he was. And it took, like, what was it, 27 threes in a row missed by the Rockets. That tells you, and they were still in that game against the Golden State Warriors. They missed 27 threes in a row and still in that game. And so that tells you how good that defense was for the Houston Rockets. So we'll see what the Rockets do. They got their superstar back. They needed him. Chris Paul showed how important he was in the playoffs. And maybe the defense was so good last year that taking a little bit of a step back won't matter. You know, it was, Ariza did contribute to missing 27 threes in that playoff game, and maybe that's why they were okay letting him go. But it'll be interesting to see. All right, guys, like and subscribe. Do it right now. The button, I think it's down here. Click it. Do it. You want to watch all these videos. Let me know in the comments what you think. Tell me what you want to talk about. We got to keep going. I'm back. We're going to be doing this more and more and more. All right, talk to you later.